I've worked in science and technology for most of my career. For the past 15 years or so, I've focused on innovation. I've studied the way natural innovators come up with the creative solutions that cause us all to just say, wow. So this presentation is about using the things that I've learned working in industry on innovative problem solutions and developing it to teach middle school children how to think more creatively. I got this idea from Shanahan School District. Shanahan Middle School has a class called Dream Lab. And this is a class for middle school students where we're trying to teach them about creative thinking and problem solving. The students pick a problem that they have an interest in or a passion about, and then they get together to come up with creative solutions. One of the students chose this problem. In a class when multiple students are using colored markers for their projects, sometimes they don't put the right color cap on the marker when they're done using it. So the next person can't be sure if the color of the marker is the same as indicated by the cap. So they wanted to find a solution to this problem. So this presentation demonstrates how brainstorming innovative problems can be facilitated to teach children. Now this method is the one that I've mentioned. I've used very effectively to generate innovative solutions to industrial and business problems. And the method has been adapted here for use by children. So, how do naturally creative people think and come up with ideas? Well, they start out, they have a specific problem that they're working on, but what they can do is think about a previous problem and look at the solution to that previous problem. It might be a problem they solved, or it might be one that they read about. Then the natural innovator can think abstractly about the specific solution to a previous problem. Then they can look at the resources that exist in this new problem they're working on, and by combining the abstract solution from the previous problem and the resources available to them here, they come up with ideas. And then these ideas can be the basis for a solution for the new problem. Now, what I've concluded is this ability to look at a previous specific solution and then think about it abstractly. This is the essence of natural creativity. People that tend to come up with very innovative ideas can do this in a very intuitive and natural way. However, what I have learned is that the ability to do this can be taught. So how does this work? Well, first the student decides on the nature of the problem. In this case, we're saying that the problem can either be there's something good that they want to make even better, or there's something bad that they want to reduce or eliminate. After that decision is made, then the student considers a list of abstract problem solutions or innovative principles. These I've taken from something called TRIZ, T-R-I-Z. It's the Russian acronym for Theory of Inventive Problem Solving. Many years ago, a man named Henrik Altschuler cataloged inventive or abstract principles by looking at patents. And he had put together 40 principles. And he used these in a number of innovation algorithms. I've adapted those principles here. So I have one set of innovative principles you can consider to find ways to make something good even better. And then there's another set of innovative principles you can consider for reducing or eliminating something bad. Each innovative principle can be combined with the available resources in the current problem, and that will generate ideas that we can then record. So here's how it works. I put together a PowerPoint presentation where all of these principles are cataloged. And the student starts out by saying either you want to make something good even better, or reduce or eliminate something bad. If you click on make something good even better, then this page comes up. Each one of these is an abstract innovative principle, and each one has a definition. And by understanding the definition and examples of how that innovative principle was used, it helps you come up with ideas of your own. If the nature of the problem was to reduce or eliminate something bad, then this screen comes up, and similarly, there are definitions for each one of these inventive principles. So, our problem statement, we want to find a way to counteract the wrong color caps are placed on markers. Okay, so here you see the typical Sharpie markers, and I look at any one and I assume that if I take the green pen, that is a green marker. But if the caps were mixed up, then I have a problem. So once the problem statement is laid out, we can then go to those inventive principles for reducing or eliminating something bad. And here the first one I've selected is eliminate the cause. Okay, so the definition here is to prevent harmful effects by eliminating at least one of the things that caused it. So, can I counteract the harmful effect by eliminating some of these factors? Can I replace an element in the system that's causing the harm with some other element that doesn't produce this bad effect? Can different resources be used to eliminate the harmful effect? Or can the cause of the harmful effect be counteracted in some way? So, one idea that might come out of thinking about this is, well, we can put the cap on the top of the marker before you use it, so that the cap is never separated from the marker. The thing that causes this problem is that the cap and the marker are separated. So by eliminating that cause, I solve the problem. Next, I'll look at the principle counteract. This means to counteract a harmful effect with some useful action, or even better, a harmful one that could reverse it. In this case, we say that the harmful effect, the bad thing, has already happened. Now I'm going to take some action to counteract it. So, an idea here, after the caps have been taken off and mixed up, okay, I can have a student go through all of them and correct any errors. Okay, so the bad thing occurred, the caps got mixed up, but then I take an action afterwards to fix that. Okay, next, consider the principle mismatch. Okay, mismatch is a very interesting principle. It says to mismatch some elements in the system so that this harmful thing can't occur. One example of this is in hospitals. There are oxygen tanks and nitrogen tanks, but the threads on the two tanks are different, so that it would be impossible for someone to accidentally hook nitrogen up to an oxygen mask. Okay, so those the threads on the oxygen and nitrogen are mismatched. So in our case, what could we mismatch? Well, we can think about the various pieces. In this case, we have the marker itself and the cap. So how could we mismatch those? Well, perhaps we could change the shape of the cap and the marker. So we could have the black markers have a round marker and a cap. Red ones could be square, blue ones could be pentagon, green ones could be hexagons, etc. In this way, you can't put the wrong cap on a marker because the shapes would have to match. And next, exclude. This principle says exclude an element by transferring its functions to the remaining elements. So is there some part of this system that we could do without, or the function that the part performs I can do in some other way? Okay? So an idea here would be, well, let's eliminate the cap. If I don't have the cap, how can I stop the tip from drying out? Well, maybe I could make the marker point retractable like a ballpoint pen. Okay? So in this case, the tip of the pen would go inside and it wouldn't dry out, but I would never have to worry about the caps being mixed up. Okay, next, combine. So combine means to put two or more things together to counteract some harmful effect. Okay? So, can one element be placed with a bunch of smaller ones? Can parts of the system be connected in some way? Well, I've really only got two parts here. I've got the cap and the marker. So what if I connect those? I have a string or cable of some kind. So I connect the cap to the body of the marker. So I can take it off to write, but the cap never gets separated, so it can't get mixed up. Okay, next, helper. Utilize a helper. So helper means, is there some catalyst I could use that would make things go better? Can I separate two items in some way so that the bad effect doesn't happen if it's something that occurs when two things are brought together? Could a third person be used to avoid some argument or conflict? Well, considering a third person, perhaps when we're giving the markers out, I can have a student help the teacher by giving the markers out and putting the right caps on when they're returned. So in this way, I have a helper that eliminates the problem of the caps getting mixed up. Next, we'll consider principles that focus on the use of resources. There are 5 resources we can consider. Resources in space, that would be any space in or near the system. Resources in time, something that happens before, during, or after the process takes place. Energy resources, either in the system or energy that's available nearby. Substances, all kinds of materials and materials that I might change. And finally, information. Is there some information I can get from the system that I can use to make things better? So we'll consider using space resources, and the principle here is passing through. Now, passing through means have one object pass through the space occupied by another. Okay, so can one object be made flexible to accommodate a second object? Can one object move through the space that another was in, and so forth? So if we consider that here, well, the cap snaps over the top of the marker. Well, what if I made it possible for the cap to be slid downward over the marker? Again, the marker and the cap would be connected, but the marker would pass through the space of the cap. So by sliding the cap down, I could then eliminate the problem of the cap and the marker being separated. Okay, and finally, substances transformed. So this says, can I change the characteristics of one or more of the materials in the system to eliminate this harmful effect? Okay, can I change the shape? Can I change from solid to liquid, liquid to gas, and so forth? So what could I change? Well, what if I thought about how I might change the cap? Well, maybe I could make the cap transparent so I can see the color of the marker tip. In that case, it wouldn't matter which cap I put back on, they'd all be transparent, but I could still see which color marker I'm using. So, in conclusion, in this case, in this example, I've only considered a few of the innovative principles. In a real problem-solving session, we'd consider all of the principles. Now, some of those would generate ideas and others wouldn't. But that's fine, and usually we go through the whole set. Now, when I've done this and used this structured brainstorming approach with other groups, I found that the team will generate 3 to 10 times the number of ideas. This is important because Linus Pauling is the world-famous chemist who won the Nobel Prize. Pauling said, if you want to have good ideas, you must have many ideas. Most of them will be wrong, and what you have to learn is which ones to throw away. This approach to brainstorming and creativity does exactly that. It helps us generate a nearly exhaustive set of ideas. So another aspect of this is that the more I learned these innovation principles, the more I use them with teams in brainstorming, I began to see the underlying abstract principles all over the place. One day I was watching a television commercial, and I saw this ad for something called the topsy-turvy tomato plant. The idea here, you grow tomatoes in the conventional way, and as the tomatoes get bigger, the vines kind of fall over and the tomatoes will lay on the ground, and you have to go out and tie them up on stakes and so forth. Well, the topsy-turvy tomato plant grows upside down, so you never have to worry about the tomatoes getting heavy and the plant resting on the ground. When I saw this, I immediately said, that's a good example of the innovation principle invert. That principle says to do things backwards instead of forwards, upside down, inside out, and I saw immediately this as an example. So the more I used the principles, the more I got to see the underlying abstract principle in a specific problem solution. So today, the new Pete Hannock is still not Linus Pauling, but I do feel that I'm more creative now in my ability to think more creatively than I was before I learned these innovation principles. Finally, some years ago, I was using a Dell computer. And as I was working, a message popped up on the screen. The message said, you should plug the computer in to avoid losing data. Well, I had the computer plugged in. Well, I then learned that the AC adapter on my computer had failed. So I ran out to the store and bought an adapter. It wasn't a Dell adapter, it was a third-party AC adapter. I plugged it in, and a message came up, and it said, the type of adapter can't be identified. And this seemed kind of strange. Everything seemed all right, but then after a while, I saw that the adapter was not charging the battery. Okay? And this upset me because my portable computer was now no longer portable. But then I began to wonder, well, why did Dell do that? I mean, if it was an adapter at the same voltage, why wouldn't it work? Then I got to thinking, well, if I'm Dell, I really don't want someone buying a third-party adapter. I want them to buy a Dell adapter. So I said, this is an example of mismatching on Dell's part. So I was really excited because I never would have thought of it that way before, that this was an example of mismatching. So I called a colleague of mine up, a gentleman named Sergey Malkin. He's a Russian trees specialist, and he's the fellow that taught me the basics of these innovation principles. I started to tell my story to Sergey, and I said, I had this adapter, I plugged it in, I bought the new adapter. Before I could finish, he said, that's a great example of mismatching. So another consequence of this is when multiple people learn these innovation principles, they begin to talk about problem solutions and inventions in terms of which inventive principles are involved. So the innovation principles become a language of innovation. And this, I think, is important from a number of standpoints. When people collaborate, if they have a common language, that makes them more productive. When you're talking to your boss in your job and you have an idea and he thinks the idea is just a little crazy, you can say, no, that may be, but this is an example of this particular principle of mismatching or dividing or combining. So it gives a way for you to explain your idea in terms that have some logic or rationale to them. And finally, like any language, English, German, Spanish, in order to become fluent, we have to practice the language. We have to use it. And that's the same here. The more we use these innovation principles, the more fluent we become, and we develop a language of innovation. Finally, I think it's important that children learn reading, writing, arithmetic, geography, history. These are practical skills that everyone needs. And children are naturally creative, and school curriculums should also help children expand their natural creativity. This creativity is obviously essential for our future. Now, Ken Robinson, who's a noted lecturer on the topic of education, gave a very interesting TED Talk, which you may find interesting, about do schools kill creativity? In his talk, Robinson says that creativity is as important as literacy. And so that's the reason that I'm taking these ideas about innovation and innovation principles forward. I think this could be one of the tools that schools use to help children cultivate their creativity along with their learning the basics of reading, writing, and so forth. Thanks for watching. For more information, or if you'd like to discuss these ideas more, please contact me at the following email address.